What happens when a beloved soul singer sits down for what should be a simple interview, only to find himself under attack from a host who seems more interested in tearing him down than having a conversation? In just 49 seconds of cutting remarks, Tamron Hall would ignite a confrontation so intense that it would end with Teddy Swims walking off her set, leaving behind a stunned studio audience and a host who had just revealed her true colors on live television. The morning started like any other taping. Teddy Swims, the gravelly-voiced singer who had captured hearts with his raw emotion and authentic presence, arrived at the studio ready to talk about his music, his journey, and connect with fans. He was there to promote his latest work, to share his story of going from singing covers in his car to performing on stages around the world. What he did not expect was to become the target of a host who seemed determined to make him look small. The cameras rolled, and Tamron Hall opened with what seemed like a standard welcome, but anyone watching closely could sense something off in her tone, something sharp beneath the surface smile. Teddy sat across from her, relaxed and genuine, his trademark warmth radiating as he prepared to share his passion for music. Then the first jab came. "So, Teddy," Tamron began, her voice carrying an edge that did not match her smile, "a lot of people are wondering how someone who started out doing covers in their bedroom suddenly thinks they belong on the same stage as real artists who have been doing this for decades. What would you say to those who think you are just riding a wave of internet fame?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This was not a question. This was an accusation dressed up as curiosity. Teddy blinked, clearly taken aback, but he kept his composure. "Well, I would say that every artist starts somewhere," he replied evenly. "I have been singing my whole life. The internet just gave me a platform to reach people. But the work, the heart, the years of grinding, that has always been there." Tamron leaned back in her chair, and her expression was one of exaggerated skepticism. "Right. But there is a difference between posting videos online and actually earning your place in the music industry. Is there not? I mean, some of us have worked with people who spent years, decades even, perfecting their craft before they got any recognition." The implication was clear. She was suggesting that Teddy had not earned his success, that he was somehow lesser than other artists she deemed more worthy. The audience grew quieter, the energy in the room shifting from excited to tense. Teddy kept his cool, though his jaw tightened slightly. "I respect every artist and their journey. My journey is different, but that does not make it less valid. Music is about connection, about reaching people where they are. If my videos helped me do that, I am grateful for it." "Grateful," Tamron repeated, as if tasting something sour. That is an interesting word choice. Some might say you should be more than grateful. Some might say you should be humble, given that there are people with far more talent who never get the opportunities handed to you. There it was. The mask was slipping. This was not an interview anymore. This was a takedown, and Tamron Hall was the one wielding the knife. Teddy leaned forward, his expression still calm, but his voice firmer now. "I am humble. I know where I come from. I know how hard this road has been. But I also know my worth, and I know the connection I have with people who listen to my music. That is not something that gets handed to you. That is something you build." Tamron laughed, but it was not a kind laugh. It was dismissive, condescending. "The connection you have with people," she echoed mockingly. "You mean the people who discovered you through an algorithm? That's not a real connection, Teddy. That's just the internet, doing what the internet does, elevating mediocrity because it is easy to consume." The studio went silent. Someone in the audience gasped audibly. The crew behind the cameras exchanged shocked glances. This was crossing a line, and everyone knew it. Teddy's expression changed. The warmth that usually defined him was replaced by something harder, something that said he had reached his limit. I am sorry. Did you just call my music mediocre? Tamron shrugged, unbothered by the rising tension. I am just saying what a lot of industry professionals are thinking. There is a difference between viral moments and actual artistry. You had some nice videos, sure, but let us be honest about what you really are. You are a cover artist who got lucky. The words hung in the air like poison. Teddy sat back, shaking his head slowly, processing what he had just heard. He had come here expecting a conversation, maybe some tough questions, but this was character assassination. That is incredibly disrespectful, he said quietly, but his voice carried weight. Not just to me, but to everyone who has supported me, everyone who connects with what I do. You do not get to decide what is real artistry and what is not based on your narrow view of how success should look. Tamron waved a hand dismissively. Oh, please, do not play the victim card. If you want to be taken seriously, you need to accept criticism. Or is that too much for someone who is used to getting praise from fans who do not know any better? Now, she had gone after his fans, the people who had lifted him up, who had believed in him when nobody else did. Teddy's eyes flashed with anger, but he took a breath, clearly trying to maintain his composure. My fans know better than you ever will, he said, his voice steady but laced with controlled fury. They know what real connection feels like. They know what authenticity sounds like. And they definitely know the difference between someone who loves what they do and someone who is just going through the motions for a paycheck. The jab landed. Tamron's face flushed, her professional facade cracking. Excuse me? Are you suggesting that I do not care about my work? I am suggesting that you invited me here under the pretense of an interview and instead decided to attack me for reasons I cannot even understand, Teddy shot back. What is this really about, Tamron? Because it sure as hell is not about my music. Tamron stood up abruptly, her voice rising. This is about standards. This is about protecting the integrity of an industry that people like you are turning into a joke. You think because you can sing other people's songs and make teenage girls cry that you are an artist? That is not art. That is karaoke with good lighting. The audience erupted in scattered boos and shocked murmurs. This had gone far beyond uncomfortable. This was a train wreck happening in real time, and Tamron Hall was the engineer who had derailed her own show. Teddy stood up too, his chair scraping against the floor. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and righteous anger. You know what? I came here to talk about my music, to connect with people, to share my story. But clearly, you had a different agenda. You wanted to tear me down to make yourself feel bigger. Oh, do not flatter yourself, Tamron snapped back. You are not important enough to warrant that kind of attention. Then why am I here? Teddy challenged, his voice cutting through the chaos. Why invite me on your show if I am so beneath you? Was this whole thing just a setup so you could feel superior? Tamron's face twisted with indignation. Maybe I wanted to do the music industry a favor by exposing you for what you really are. A fraud. A manufactured product of social media algorithms who will be forgotten the moment the next viral sensation comes along. That was the breaking point. Teddy shook his head, a bitter smile crossing his face. You know what the saddest part about this is? I actually respected you. I grew up watching you, thinking you were someone who lifted people up, who gave voices to those who needed to be heard. But this is just sad. You are tearing someone down because, what? Because they did not follow the same path you think they should have. Because they found success in a way that threatens whatever outdated idea you have about how things should work. How dare you, Tamron hissed, her professionalism completely abandoned now. I have been in this industry longer than you have been alive. I have interviewed presidents, world leaders, actual artists. You are nothing but a boy with a phone and an internet connection. Teddy laughed, but it was hollow. And yet, here you are, threatened by that boy with a phone. What does that say about you? The silence that followed was deafening. Tamron's mouth opened and closed, searching for a comeback that would not come. She had overplayed her hand, revealed too much of the jealousy and bitterness that had been driving this ambush from the start. Teddy unclipped his microphone, the small metallic sound echoing in the silent studio. I am done here. I do not need this. I do not need your validation. And I definitely do not need to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly forgot what it means to be human, let alone a good interviewer. You walk off this set and you will never work in this town again, Tamron threatened, her voice shaking with rage. I have connections. I have power. I can make sure every door in this industry closes in your face. Teddy paused, turning back to look at her with something close to pity. See, that right there, that is the difference between us. You think power comes from tearing people down and making threats. I know it comes from building people up and staying true to who you are. You can make all the calls you want. The people who matter, the ones who actually care about music and authenticity, they will see this for what it is. They will see you for who you really are. He dropped the microphone on his chair and started walking toward the exit. The audience watched in stunned silence, some people already pulling out their phones, knowing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for a long time. Tamron called after him, her voice desperate now, the reality of what she had just done starting to sink in. This is not over, Teddy. You cannot just walk away. He stopped at the edge of the stage, looking back one final time. Watch me. And then he was gone, leaving Tamron Hall standing alone on her own set, surrounded by a shocked crew and an audience that had just watched her destroy her own credibility in real time. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of her unraveling, every second of the karma that was already beginning to catch up with her. A producer rushed onto the set frantically, gesturing for the cameras to cut. But it was too late. The damage was done. What was supposed to be a simple promotional interview had turned into a masterclass in how entitlement and bitterness can poison everything they touch. Tamron tried to compose herself, smoothing her hair and straightening her jacket, but her hands were shaking. The audience sat frozen, unsure of what to do, unsure if they should applaud or sit in silence. Some people were already heading for the exits, not wanting to be part of whatever uncomfortable aftermath was about to unfold. Let us take a break, Tamron announced to no one in particular, her voice brittle. But there was no coming back from this. Everyone in that studio knew it. The crew knew it. The audience knew it. And somewhere, walking out of the building with his head held high, Teddy Swims knew it too. He had come to share his story, to connect with people through his music, to be vulnerable and open. Instead, he had been forced to defend his worth, his journey, his very existence as an artist. And he had done it with grace, with strength, with the kind of authenticity that no amount of industry credentials or television experience could manufacture. Behind him, he left a host who had revealed herself to be everything she accused him of being: inauthentic, manufactured, and desperate for relevance in an industry that was moving on without her. She had tried to use her platform to diminish someone she saw as a threat, someone whose success reminded her of her own irrelevance. But in the end, all she had done was prove exactly why Teddy Swims had connected with millions of people while she sat in a studio, clinging to a power that was already slipping through her fingers. The walk to his car felt longer than usual. The adrenaline was still pumping through his veins, his heart racing from the confrontation. He replayed the moment in his mind, wondering if he could have handled it differently, if there was something he could have said to de-escalate the situation. But deep down, he knew that nothing he said would have mattered. Tamron had made up her mind before he ever walked onto that set. His phone started buzzing before he even reached the parking lot. Text messages flooding in from friends, family, colleagues who had been watching live. They had seen everything. They had witnessed the ambush, the insults, the desperate attempts to tear him down. And they were rallying around him, offering support, expressing outrage at how he had been treated. But Teddy did not need their validation either. He knew who he was. He knew what he had built. And more importantly, he knew why he had built it. Not for fame, not for glory, but for connection, for the pure joy of making music that moved people, that made them feel seen and understood. Back in the studio, chaos reigned. The producers were in full panic mode, trying to figure out how to salvage the rest of the show, how to spin what had just happened. But there was no spinning this. Social media was already exploding with clips of the confrontation, with people expressing shock and disgust at Tamron's behavior. One audience member had captured the whole thing on their phone, and it was already making the rounds. The comments were brutal, but they were not directed at Teddy. They were aimed squarely at Tamron Hall, at her unprofessionalism, her cruelty, her transparent jealousy. She really thought she was doing something, one comment read. All she did was show everyone who she really is. Teddy Swims handled that with so much class, another person wrote. He tried to be respectful even when she was coming for his throat. That is real character. Imagine being so insecure that you invite someone on your show just to tear them down, someone else posted. Tamron Hall just ended her own career. The irony was not lost on anyone. In trying to diminish Teddy's success, Tamron had only amplified it. In attempting to expose him as a fraud, she had revealed herself to be the real pretender. In using her platform to attack, she had handed him the moral high ground and watched him walk away with his dignity intact. Teddy sat in his car for a moment before starting the engine. He took a deep breath, letting the weight of what had just happened settle on his shoulders. It was not the outcome he had wanted, not the story he had planned to tell. But it was honest. It was real. And in a world that often rewarded polish over authenticity, maybe that was exactly the story that needed to be told. He thought about his fans, the people who had supported him from the beginning, who had seen something real in his music and chosen to believe in it. They were the ones who mattered. Not Tamron Hall with her talk show and her industry connections. Not the gatekeepers who thought success only counted if it came through traditional channels. But the people who listened to his songs in their cars, in their bedrooms, in the quiet moments when they needed to feel understood. Those were the people he sang for. Those were the people he would continue to sing for, regardless of what any talk show host or industry insider had to say about it. He turned the key in the ignition and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the studio and its chaos behind him. The sun was bright, the day stretching ahead with possibilities. Somewhere out there, people were listening to his music. Somewhere out there, someone was discovering his voice for the first time and feeling that spark of connection that made all of this worthwhile. And back in that studio, Tamron Hall was learning a lesson that she should have known all along. You cannot dim someone else's light to make your own shine brighter. All you do is reveal how much darkness lives inside you. The confrontation had lasted less than 20 minutes, but it would define both of their careers in ways neither could have anticipated. For Teddy, it would become a testament to his character, proof that success had not changed who he was at his core. For Tamron, it would be a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting bitterness and insecurity poison professionalism. As Teddy drove away, he turned on his own music, letting the familiar melodies wash over him. This was why he did it. Not for the interviews, not for the validation, but for this. The pure, simple joy of singing, of creating, of connecting. And no talk show host, no matter how powerful they thought they were, could take that away from him. The studio audience finally filed out, their excited chatter about the upcoming show replaced with uncomfortable whispers about what they had just witnessed. They had come expecting entertainment, maybe some laughs, definitely some good music talk. What they got instead was a front row seat to a character assassination that had backfired spectacularly. Tamron remained on set, surrounded by her team, who were trying to figure out next steps. But she was not listening to them. She was staring at the empty chair where Teddy had been sitting, replaying the confrontation in her mind, perhaps beginning to realize the magnitude of her mistake. She had thought she was untouchable, that her years in the industry and her platform gave her the right to judge, to determine who was worthy and who was not. She had forgotten that respect is earned, not demanded. That credibility can be destroyed in moments. That viewers remember how you make people feel, and she had just made millions of people feel disgusted. Her phone was buzzing too, but the messages she was receiving were different from Teddy's. They were from publicists, from network executives, from people whose opinions she actually cared about. And they were all asking the same question. What were you thinking? She had no good answer. In her desire to put Teddy in what she considered his place, she had lost sight of her own position. She had violated the basic principle of her profession: make the guest feel comfortable, create space for good conversation, let the audience connect with the person on the couch. Instead, she had turned her show into a battleground and lost the war before it even really began. The production team was already discussing whether to air the episode at all, whether damage control was even possible at this point. But it did not matter. The footage was out there. The audience had seen it. The internet had captured it. There was no putting this genie back in the bottle. Meanwhile, Teddy was halfway home, his mind already shifting to what came next. There would be more interviews, more opportunities to tell his story. But he would be more careful now, more selective about who he trusted with his time and his truth. This experience had taught him that not everyone who invites you to their table has your best interests at heart. But it had also reminded him why he started this journey in the first place. Not for the approval of people like Tamron Hall, but for the connection with people who genuinely cared about the music, about the message, about the human being behind the voice. As he pulled into his driveway, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. Yes, the confrontation had been ugly. Yes, it was not how he wanted to spend his morning, but he had stood up for himself, defended his worth, and walked away with his integrity intact. And sometimes that was the biggest victory of all. The sun continued to shine. The world kept turning, and somewhere out there, someone was pressing play on one of his songs, finding comfort in his voice, feeling less alone because of the music he had created. That was what mattered. That was what would always matter. And no amount of bitterness from threatened gatekeepers could change that simple, beautiful truth.